If you're a nonprofit CEO or executive director, you know there's a succession conversation with your board you've been putting off. Because the moment you raise it, people start making assumptions about you. Your board starts thinking you're getting ready to leave. Your team starts asking, wait, is something wrong? Your donors start thinking, should I be worried? So you wait. And that wait is costing you more than you think. When there's no plan, the organization can become dangerously dependent on one person. If that person leaves or can no longer lead, the board can be left without a ready successor and no interim plan. Funders may take a wait-and-see stance if they sense instability. And strong people on your team may leave if the future feels unclear. Avoiding succession increases the chances of a leadership crisis that can cost the organization funding, people, and progress on its mission. And let me tell you, this is not a small issue. In 2021, BoardSource reported that only 29% of nonprofits had a written executive succession plan. Their more recent findings still put the number at fewer than 1 in 3. So the needle has barely moved. And it's likely worse in smaller organizations that might not have the planning capacity. Here's the gap. The leader can often see what's coming before the board has a real plan for it. Now, I know this not just from research. I know it from being inside the room and it happening to me. I was the founder. I had built something that never existed in our region before. It was a collaboration model that was replicated nationally with real benchmarks. It had real risk, responsibility, had to raise a lot of money and create these partnerships, lots and lots of partnerships. It was supposed to last 5 years in its demonstration phase, but we had reached all the benchmarks and the organization was still going and funders were excited and still committed. So by the time year 6 rolled around, I was still in the seat. But I had to face a question I really couldn't take to the board meeting or put on the board agenda. And I really couldn't drop it into a staff conversation. And the question: was this organization ready to move forward without me? Not because I was leaving right then, and certainly not because the board was pushing me out, and there wasn't a crisis going on. So I started the conversation. It wasn't easy. It was tough, but I went first. I started with my chair. We had a very deep conversation where I could assure him that I wasn't giving him an announcement that I was leaving, and that we began to craft the ways we could talk to the board without raising alarm or panic. And then we began the process of really looking intentionally at succession because the organization was so valuable and important. And so we ran the process the right way. And because we did, that organization still exists today. I want to talk about why waiting creates risk, how to open the conversation without making people think you out the door, and what it looks like when succession is handled before pressure takes over. And that way, you're not waiting for the board to get nervous or the staff to start guessing or funders to wonder what's going on. You are opening the conversation while there's still time to lead it well. Most executive directors have a question they keep entirely to themselves. If I step back, does this still work? If I stay, am I in the way? Have I become a part of what's holding this organization back? Now, these are not planning questions. They are identity questions. They are about who you are, what you built, and what happens to it when you're no longer the one holding things together. And you do not take those questions to a meeting. You can't put them in the board packet. You sit with them alone and wonder about them. You wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning thinking about them. I know I did. And the sector will tell you that succession is a board responsibility. Now, that's true. The board owns the formal process, but that framing misses what the executive is actually dealing with. For the person sitting in the seat, succession is not just a governance policy. It's the question of what happens to something you've built, something you've given years to, when you are no longer holding it all together. That is why the conversation can feel risky. You're not just thinking about a policy. You're thinking about whether the board is ready, whether the team is ready, whether the organization is ready, and whether you are ready to stop being the center of so many decisions. So the leader sits with it quietly, and the organization keeps moving like nothing has changed. I did the same thing. Even knowing what I knew about the risk, I sat with it privately for a long while before I was ready to bring this conversation forward. That private weight, that heaviness is real. But I tell you, the longer it stays inside of you and you keep circling around and wondering about it and second guessing, it puts you and the organization in risk. And while the executives are sitting with this privately, the sector is not standing still. Nonprofit CEO departures hit record levels in 2025, with 860 exits through April alone, up 15%. And about 1 in 3 nonprofit CEOs say they are likely to leave within 2 to 5 years. The wave is not coming, the wave is here, which puts you in a bind. If you bring it up, people may read it the wrong way. If you don't bring it up, the organization stays exposed. That's why I created the board conversation starter, the 5 sentences that start the conversation. It gives you the exact words to open this discussion so they don't assume you're on your way out. You can find it in the description below. So what do you do with a conversation that matters this much when waiting is creating risk and can cause so much panic? You go first. Not because you have all the answers, but because you are the one who can frame this conversation before fear frames it for you. So think about what happens when you bring this conversation up before anyone else does. The board hears it from a prepared leader, not because a crisis forced the conversation open. You decide what it means, not panic, not a departure announcement, not a signal something wrong, a leadership responsibility. And the earlier you start, the more time you have to shape the process rather than react to it. When I started this process at my own organization, I wasn't leaving and I wasn't being pushed out. I chose to lead the conversation because I finally understood that if I waited until there was a reason to have it, the conversation would belong to the crisis and not to me. Now I was scared, it was real nervous because there was a lot riding on it. But I also figured that, if I go first, I would have the opportunity to shape it. You know what I'm saying? And I believe that good succession planning has a rhythm. It's not a document you file away. It's a process you lead on purpose over time. One that gives the organization, the board, and yes, you, yourself, gives you time, gets you ready for what's ever next. And the cost of waiting are real. A leadership vacancy can take months to fill. Search costs can climb into the thousands. And that does not count the distractions, donor anxiety, everybody sitting back, laying, waiting to see what happens. And going first does not make you look weak. It makes you look prepared, in charge, ready to talk about the organization, its future, and what would be best for the mission. A prepared leader, a ready leader. But even a well-run executive transition can miss something critical because succession alone cannot stop with the person at the top. Succession that only focuses on the top role is not succession, it's replacement. Replacement is not enough when the real question is whether the organization is ready. Real succession looks at the whole bench, not just who is next in line, not just who is next in the top seat. When we did this work at my organization, we asked who else was ready to grow, where we were thin, and where too much was sitting on one person. We looked at the full picture. That is what real succession includes, and it cannot be done well under pressure. It has to start before everyone is urgent about it. Many leaders are close enough to transition to feel it, to almost touch it, but their organizations are acting as if there is time to get ready later. So if you're sitting with this right now, knowing the conversation needs to happen, but not sure how to open it without creating fear, start with language that lowers the fear. That is what the board conversation starter, the 5 sentences that start the conversation, is for. Specific language designed to open the conversation in a way your board can actually hear it. The link is down below in the description. So the succession plan is not where most leaders get stuck. The conversation is. Because it requires you to face something many leaders keep entirely to themselves. I need to know this organization can move forward without me. That's not about stepping away. It's about taking responsibility for what comes next. The leaders who do this well do not wait for the perfect moment. They just decide to go first. You've built something worth protecting, and this is how you protect it. Go on and grab that conversation starter in the link below, and we'll talk again soon.